Now, elsewhere, of course, there was plenty of attention on ancient Christian rituals over the Easter weekend. I showed you earlier an Easter service disrupted in Canada. Let me show you something similar in London. This Polish Catholic church service was underway with the worshippers wearing masks and social distancing, and then in walked the bobbies. Police eventually took over the lectern and they had this to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, this gathering is unfortunately unlawful under the coronavirus regulations we have currently. You are not allowed to meet inside with this many people under law. At this moment in time, you need to go home. Failure to comply with this direction to leave and go to your home address ultimately could lead you to be fined £200, or if you fail to give your details, to you being arrested.
Happy Easter, hey? Just crazy stuff. I can't believe some of the over-officiousness we've seen in Western liberal democracies over the past year. Go home from church or you'll be arrested or fined. That was it. Worshippers left in fear of violating the national coronavirus regulations. The church has since defended the service and complained to London's Metropolitan Police. Let's bring in the Director of Culture, Prosperity and Civil Society at the Centre for Independent Studies, Peter Kurti. Peter, good to talk to you again. Happy Easter.
Thank you, Chris, and to you. Good to talk to you.
Look, people were able to worship in Australia this Easter, but seeing the way services were interrupted in North America and London must really alarm you.
Well, it is disturbing because I think freedom of religious practice, freedom to worship is actually a very important freedom that we really value. And that we hold fast to. And whilst it's important to understand the epidemiological aspect of this, which you've already been discussing in the program, and the fact that the spread of the virus has to be stopped or at least controlled, the police have been very heavy-handed in many parts of the world, including in the early days in Australia, making people comply with orders that seemed to make little sense at the time. And certainly that experience in the UK, I think, is very alarming because people come to worship, they gather in good faith, and then to have the police stand up and say that they're actually breaking the law in doing so does smack somewhat of totalitarian regimes.
It sure does. I would have thought you've got to have the most extreme reasons to prevent people from worshipping. Imagine what they would be. Imagine the hue and cry if this was happening elsewhere. I want to get to Easter and our religious observances, Peter. That you must see this the Easter holiday now as virtually just a secular event. There's hardly any hint in the public discourse of the religious significance at all, and I've certainly seen this diminish over my relatively long period on this planet.
Well, I think that's true. Christianity is an important part of Australian culture and has been since the earliest days of the colony, when the colonies were created. And so Christianity is like a golden thread woven into the life of the country. But of course, we are also one of the world's most successful multicultural countries, and we see the rise of other religious traditions and groups. And I think that the hold, as it were, that Christianity has over our nation has indeed diminished, but it's by no means extinct. And there are many Christians who still worship very faithfully. But I think the profile of the Christian life in this country has changed a lot.
Yeah, it is interesting because there's an opportunity here for people, whether they're religious or not, to at least reflect on some of the key messages about salvation, redemption, sacrifice, doing good for others. Yet we see, I noticed this on the ABC, Paul Murray pointed this out to me. The ABC used it as a chance to run a story on a survey asking people whether they believe in ghosts and whether they believe in miracles or angels and a soul and God, and trying to suggest that people don't believe in God. But I mean, most Australians, about over half of us, according to the census, claim to be Christian.
Well, it's not quite a half, but it's absolutely true. And I've been saying this since those last census findings came in 2016, the census in 2016, that over 60% of Australians have a religious belief. And that was played down at the time and has been played down since. Much was made of the fact that those claiming no belief in God rose to 30%. And critics of religion would have us believe that that was actually the end of all organized religion and religious life in this country. But we know that's not true. I think, as I recall, in fact, I think you're right. I think it was about 54% of Australians claimed to have a religious affiliation. I don't have the figures in my head. But I think what's been really important in this COVID year, and some interesting research from McCrindle Research is now showing this, is that people's sense of a spiritual dimension to life has been awakened. I mean, you started the program with a review of the way in which COVID has impacted life in this country. And I think as families have been divided, people have been separated from one another, they've not been able to observe family holidays or attend funerals or weddings. I think that's been very upsetting for a lot of people. And one of the things that is unchanging in a changing world is God and a sense of the soul. And I think that as we've seen greater social uncertainty and spiritual uncertainty in the last year, there's almost an awakening sense of the spiritual. Now, that's not to say that people are now going to flock to the churches. I don't think we're necessarily going to see a surge in institutional religious observance. But I think Australians, and I've long believed this, I think Australians are actually quite a spiritual people with a really strong sense of the non-material aspect of life.